Hi guys, my name is Kayla Martinez, and this is my project, which specifically focused on creating a resilient community through wildfire mitigation, specifically engaging the community in wildfire preparedness. So a little bit about me. I'm a junior at Colorado Mountain College, majoring in sustainability studies with a minor in business. I'm also enrolled in the Rocky Mountain Land Management Program, which allows students to start a career with the Forest Service while they're obtaining their degree and go into a permanent position after they finish their degree. Specifically, I plan to go into recreation with them after college. And then I grew up in Colorado, specifically Lakewood, and I enjoy spending a lot of time outdoors, hiking and just hanging out by the river. So staff mentors that helped me through my process are Tim Sullivan, the director of the Resilient Land and Water Program, and then Nicole Pepper, our geospatial analyst and internship program manager. Throughout the process, I worked very closely with both of these folks. All right. And next we have our partners. The amazing partners that helped me guide my project were the Routt County Wildfire Mitigation Council, the CSU Extension, Routt County Emergency Operations, the Colorado State Forest Service, and the Yampa Valley Sustainability Council, and the U.S. Forest Service. So here's a little bit of background on my project. Our climate is drastically changing due to climate change, ultimately creating less snowpack for our region. This creates very dry soils, allowing for the vegetation in the area to become super dry and almost act like a tinderbox, if you will. Very easy to start and spread fire. Fire is no longer an if at this point, but rather a when, for when it's going to affect our community. Calling for communities to be prepared for when it does happen and the effects that come after it. Many communities, such as those that were involved in the Marshall Fire, as many of us know, are struggling to become resilient after the fact because they did not have the proper preparedness ready before the fire struck back in December. Some statistics specifically for Routt County. In the last 33 years, 130,000 acres have burned. Just the last 5 of those years account for 44% of the acres. And I would like to thank Luke Watson, the intern from last fall, for providing me with these stats. This means that it is critical for Routt County to be ready. So the role of the community in all this. The role of the community is extremely important in wildfire mitigation because as much as we can do as individuals, it's not going to create an overall overwhelming impact, if you will. It takes a cohesiveness of action. To ensure this cohesiveness of action takes place, Routt County is working with the Mitigation Council to create a wildfire protection plan through wildfire mitigation. A CWPP is a strategic plan that is developed by local fire departments, federal and state land management agencies, and community residents. So project objectives, as I mentioned before, we're working to develop the CWPP. These go along with that. So we're here to identify values of importance from the community and additional resources that they don't feel are currently provided. The Wildfire Mitigation Conference was specifically focused on gaining input on the values we have at risk, mitigation efforts, and additional resources. To complete this task, me and my partners organized the conference to gain input from the public. So before I really get into the nitty-gritty of the conference, we're going to do a little interactive survey. So if you can just raise your hand after I ask these questions, if you've thought about this or you've already taken action on the procedure. How many of you have made copies of important documents you feel are necessary and would be devastating to lose in the event of a wildfire? One person. This isn't made to make you feel guilty. It's to show the importance. Exactly. How many of you have a go bag ready in case you were needed to evacuate? Okay. How many of you know where your gas shutoff valve is in your home? Okay. Yeah, or if you don't have gas, it's not applicable to you. And lastly, how many of you know all of the exit and entry points in your neighborhood or complex? Like, well, okay. pretty good. Oh, we'll go back a little bit. So as you can see, it probably took a minute to think, have I done these things? Which emphasizes the importance of getting ready to go, because when an evacuation is called and you're sitting there thinking about, oh, do I have this? Do I have that? Am I ready to go? Where am I going to go? Those minutes are critical as the fire approaches, especially with new fire behavior changing due to climate change. So, as I mentioned, it's important to have a strategic plan just for that reason. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the structure of our conference. It was divvied up into 2 days, the first day being stakeholder driven and the second day being public or the community driven. This was to enable input from both entities, and I think it also helped to have them separated so that there wasn't influence from the public on the agency side and vice versa. And it was just a more cohesive, independent process. And the information's a little different too. So sometimes it can get confusing when you're talking to a stakeholder and you relay the same information to the public. It's not always as transparent. Some of the partners that were included in the organization of this conference were the Yampa Valley Sustainability Council, the U.S. Forest Service, the Colorado State Forest Service, the Bureau of Land Management, and the CSU Extension Program. My personal role in the conference was I created a questionnaire to engage participants to think about their personal wildfire plan, such as a go bag and the gas shutoff valve, basically, and it was very similar to what I just had you guys do. It was just a little bit longer. Let's see here. During the conference, I assisted in facilitated breakout rooms, answering any questions people might have or any confusion in the resources. I contributed to the storyboards and the survey boards that were used to relay information to the public during the conference. And I assisted in determining which documents would be most important for the public to have during this conference to relay the information. So now we're going to talk about some statistics and data I got from the conference. So as you can see by the chart, our watershed was the top value at risk, which makes sense because we kind of need water to live. Next, we had critical facilities, which included hospitals. Those are important for other obvious reasons. And then lastly, we had personal property and infrastructure as our third, and those two were tied. And then all of the others were a small percentage. Next, we have the types of mitigation that the community would like to see. Number one being the treatment for critical spaces to ensure that those are less likely to burn down or have severe damage from fire. Funding dedicated to mitigation on private lands. There's not a lot of this, as I'm aware of right now. And I feel that a lot of landowners are struggling with where to begin because they don't have the financial means at the moment to prepare themselves and their property from burning. And then lastly, fuel and mitigation treatments, just like dead clearing, getting slash off the property. Slash is just another term used for dead wood that you would clear. And then education and outreach to educate the community on preparedness and what wildfire looks like and what we can expect going forward as our climate continues to change. These were some additional resources and information requested by community members. Community members would really like to see wood chipper. We had this expressed very highly at the conference to help get rid of the slash. A drop-off location specifically for the location of slash so that it's not just sitting on their property acting as additional fuel sources. Contractor references for those that can help with forest mitigation efforts like cutting down timber and hauling it out. Resources dedicated specifically to apartment or condos or other complexes with shared spaces. These are very different from personal homes. Education and outreach for youth, specifically 10 to 18, as I'm sure we're aware that when you get your kids talking about something, they talk about it to their parents, and then it's like, okay, we really need to act on this. This is important. And also, they're going to be extremely affected by this going forward in their lives. So it's better to prepare them while they're young and get it ingrained in their head rather than wait until they're older and living on their own. And then also outreach for young adults, specifically between 20 and 30, because I feel that a lot of my generation don't necessarily think, oh, I need to be ready for this. It's not a big deal at the moment. And then fire district map of Routt County, so residents know which fire district corresponds with their neighborhood and where they can go to get additional resources on fire. And then lastly, resources dedicated to community leaders who would like to get other residents involved, because sometimes I feel like these leaders really think it's a great idea, but sometimes they just don't know the right way to go about getting their neighbors on board when they might be a little bit more resistant. Some conference highlights for me. I was really ecstatic about the participation from the public. They were a little more centered around one demographic, but I think just getting the overall word around the community and seeing that many people show up was really, really exciting because people actually care and they actually want to get ready for this. We were able to gather a lot of important data and information that will be used to set a foundation for the CWPP. I was able to connect with community members and engage with people. And I was able to learn how to develop my professional skills in answering difficult questions I don't always have the direct answer to, which I'm sure many of us have been in that place before. So some other projects I worked on while I was here at YVSC. I participated in community engagement with youth at the Earth Day event, which I think really helped my conversation pieces with people at the conference. I wrote the Next Generation newsletter, which was just a really good way to get my thoughts on paper and make it sound professional and cohesive. And then I attended a Yampa Restoration Project meeting with Tim, which really gave some insight on how all of our ecosystems would be affected by fire and how they're all connected. Key takeaways for the Sustainability Council. I would like to see a program or some kind of resources dedicated to youth regarding wildfire safety. As I mentioned, it's going to be around and they're probably going to experience a lot more in their lifetimes than we might. Collaborate with the college to get a course or event, even if it's just a 2-day course, to get college students involved. As Michelle mentioned, it's really important to get young leaders involved in this stuff now, and I think that's a great way to reach them. Speaking from personal experience, I've attended a lot of these 2-day courses that are focused around conferences, and it really gives you valuable information to use going forward in your career or your personal life. And then lastly, provide resources for residents in Spanish. That way we can ensure all of this important information is distributed properly to all groups that make up our community. Some personal takeaways. The types of collaboration among different entities was really important to me. As I mentioned, I'm going to go into the Forest Service and I'm going to be dealing with different agencies, community members, ages, and it was just really helpful to get that experience acting with them professionally. Secondly, figuring out tools for community engagement that actually worked. Sometimes our federal land management agencies aren't as engaged with the public as we would like them to be, as I'm sure many of us are aware. And so just having that background, I think will really help me communicate things to the public that might be a little more difficult to understand if you're not completely indulged in this topic. How to be ready for wildfire. I mean, we've talked about it, I've thought about it, but it really drilled home the sense of, hey, you need to get ready now, because just because you live in town proper doesn't mean that it's not going to happen to you. And I think that's something that really needs to be emphasized, is a lot of people in town or in the central of mountain communities don't realize, oh, I could be evacuated. It doesn't matter. Fire does not respect boundaries, whether it's state or community, urban or not. And then lastly, as I mentioned, just professional tools in general that'll be used in my career with the Forest Service: communication, professional writing, and how to just answer those difficult questions that you may not have all the answers to. Some acknowledgements I would like to give. Tim Sullivan from the Sustainability Council for providing me with a lot of the resources and guiding me through all this information. Nicole Pepper for being there to help me develop documents and professional engagement processes. Michelle Stewart from the Sustainability Council for giving me the opportunity to participate in this internship and build my resume with it. And then lastly, Carolina Manriquez from the Colorado State Forest Service. She guided me a lot in just tools with public engagement, wildfire knowledge, and just was a really great supporter in all of this. Questions?